Hey guys, it's Blockchain Brad, and today we're talking about all things fast. And to be clearer, we're talking about VITE, the French word for fast. And the reason is because we have the COO in the hot seat today, and that is none other than Richard Yen. Richard, thank you very much for being on the channel today.
Thank you, Brad. It's great to be back.
So obviously, since you are saying that it's great to be back, that's because you are doing an update for those who may not know, and you have been already in the hot seat for a full interview. Now, VITE stands for a next generation high performing decentralized application platform, essentially a very fast iteration of what we've seen in the beginning with things like Ethereum. And I don't mean to compare them, that's simply what you fundamentally are. Now, you have a Wall Street background, you are a Wall Street pro, and you know about finance. So it's really time that we discuss what you're doing of late and how you're developing, because that's ultimately what really matters. So Richard, before we start, going into some of the core updates, so what I'd like to do is just quickly go over some of the core features that you represent. Let's start with DAG Ledger, moving across all the way through down to Solidity++ and reactive contracts really quickly, so people understand what you are, what you stand for, and why you are essentially set apart from the first iterations of platforms.
Sure. So the DAG ledger is a new way of organizing the ledger. In particular, we're using the block lattice variant of the DAG ledger, and that is something we've inherited from Nano. In particular, each account has its own chain, so transactions do not have to wait on each other in order to get appended to the individual chains. So that's the first component. The second component is smart contract built on top of DAG. To our knowledge, so far, none of the DAG chains have been able to incorporate smart contract into their systems. And this is a very difficult feat, but that's something that we'll be tackling. And the third part is snapshot chain, is basically one way of reducing the risk of each individual chain being tampered with, as each account has its own chain, and when the chain grows very slowly, then the data is subject to attacks. So what snapshot chain does is that we reintroduce the concept of blockchain into the picture, so that each individual transaction not only gets added to the individual chain, but they also get snapshotted into a blockchain in order to make sure that data tampering becomes difficult over time.
I see. So you've built in key protections for security reasons as well. But Richard, I do want to ask you also with regard to the reactive contract and Solidity++. As you are aware, I introduced you mentioning Ethereum. Can we go there? Can we discuss the relationship or the connections between Ethereum? And I say this because you have named your programming language very specifically to align with that.
Sure, absolutely. So we are maximally compatible with Ethereum. The reason why we're not 100% compatible with Ethereum is because we have introduced the concept of asynchronous programming into the programming experience or the programming model. So the idea there is that instead of having each line of code execute serially, some lines of code do not necessarily have to wait on each other to be executed. So what we'll do is that some of these functions will be called upon, and then the results don't have to be returned until we execute the next line of code. But in order to take advantage of this feature, the coders will need to be using some variant of the syntax off of Solidity, not exactly like Solidity itself. We will be providing a porting guide to make the process of moving the application from Solidity to Solidity++ easily.
I see. So obviously you do have a lot of developments. Now let's talk about that in the context of the current state of the market itself. Many people are concerned with the volatility. I want to ask you directly, do you think there's room in this space for this many platforms to emerge? We've seen the first iterations of Generation 1 platforms. We're now seeing the emergence of much faster ones for enterprise value. Why is it that is happening, and what sets VITE apart to really be able to be confident that you can actually onboard key enterprises, key businesses, and key startups?
Right. So I think there's a few different reasons. Number one is performance. So what we're seeing is that the adoption of DAG has become a new trend, right? So DAG not only solves the performance issue, but it's also seemed to have become a mainstream new type of blockchain architecture.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that in terms of performance, The reason why I think we'll do well is mostly because we will be able to incorporate smart contract into the DAG framework, which no one has done so far.
I see.
And secondly, the snapshot chain is one way to resolve the security issue with the block lattice variant of the DAG structure.
I see. But Richard, can I just ask you in that respect,
Sure.
what's being done right now to indicate that you are onboarding projects? Talk us through some of the business applications, what the potential, and more importantly, some of the discussions you're having behind closed doors to really give confidence to those who are considering you as a utility, and obviously taking part potentially in your platform as someone who not only is considering it from a perhaps utility perspective, but also one of investment. And I genuinely mean that, because at the beginning, that's what it is. So
Right.
what kind of information can you provide for those who perhaps want to make the switch?
Oh, sure. So I think there are two parts of this answer. So the first one is the existing partnerships we have that we have not particularly highlighted, and I'm happy to share them with you. And the second part is the speed of our development. The reason why that's important is because lots of these partnerships take the following form. Someone wants to integrate our system, but none of the systems in the existing marketplace are ready to be plugged in. There will be some development work that still needs to be done. So the response time from the engineering team and the ability to find bugs and resolve them very quickly by the engineering team are absolutely critical. So I think a fast development time would exemplify our ability to be a good partner in the integration process. So let me get back to the first point. So we have a few partnerships now, and let me get to each of them very quickly. So first of all, OK Capital invested in us and has become a partner of us. Number two is that we have formed a partnership with a digital asset bank called MX Bank. So this was actually released on Medium as well as our Chinese social media channels, but we have not particularly highlighted this part just yet. But the idea here is that this is a full-fledged bank that will be doing deposits, lending, currency conversion, and so on. Basically, a full suite of service in regards to cryptocurrency. So what VITE will be helping out on will be providing technical support to help them develop the banking application on top of the VITE platform, and also facilitating transactions that would make VITE a key currency in the process. For example, they recently launched a collateralized loan program where somebody holding VITE that wants to also take out ETH, right, Ethereum, for perhaps short-term liquidity needs, can go to the bank, pledge their VITE, and then take out a loan in ETH, following a specific set of guidelines from that bank.
And Richard, can that be done now? Is that possible to be done currently?
Yes.
Okay, so that's obviously a real use case that someone can go and apply or involve themselves with right now. And the reason why I ask you this directly is because we're hearing a lot of discussion in the community that perhaps, it's a long-term game, a long-term play before we reach real utility. What do you say to those kind of comments?
Oh, yes. So that actually naturally leads to my next point, which is our acceleration of the timeline. So as you know, we have a fairly long development cycle, and one reason for doing so is because we don't want to overpromise, underdeliver. So the good news that's been happening lately is that we released a sneak peek of two MVP sort of applications. So the first one is a wallet, and the second one is a blockchain browser. So the wallet is with the wallet, the user of VITE will be able to do transactions, to do account transfers and so on in VITE, denominated in VITE. And with the blockchain browser, they're able to track the holders, the amount of transactions between the holders, and so on. So we released screenshots of both applications, and we expect to release the applications themselves for public testing very soon. So this is not just a screenshot or a videotape or having a third-party person coming in.
I see. It's not just hype-driven. It's not just to generate hype. You're actually saying this is coming very soon. So I do apologize for interrupting, but I wanted to ask you, when you say soon, when do you mean?
Um, so soon will be measured, I would say, um, in weeks to a month.
I see. So
So
it
it's
really
actually
genuinely
happening.
is. In crypto, obviously things move very fast, but that is quite soon, especially given the state of the market now. I think it's very important people do become aware of those that are moving into this space where people can engage for real world purposes. So VITE really is trying to do that right now.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Um,
Richard, can you talk us through the next steps? Because obviously there's going to be this ability to interact with ETH, as you said, trying to do these swaps with regard to loans. What's the next
that's right.
part of the vision?
So we are currently in the process of forming more partnerships. There are many inbound requests, so we're very selective in terms of who we want to be working with.
Hmm.
There's an example of a German company that wants to connect us. This is a German, they call themselves an process integration company. So they see the needs from many German companies that want to deploy their internal applications on blockchain space.
Hmm.
So they have a laundry list of various public chains that they would recommend to their clients. And they want to list VITE as one of the clients to be recommended.
I
So we're
see.
in serious discussion with them. Separately from that, we recently formed partnership with SecBit. SecBit um, is a security company. You can think of them as sort of like Certic, but a lot deeper than that. They do security on the virtual machine level and the transaction level, not just at the smart contract level. And this partnership we have with them is not cosmetic. This is a real partnership where we are literally presenting them with our public blockchain design to make sure that it passes all the right bars provided by this particular company.
I see.
Um, and we are pursuing a few other applications in the financial technology space. But some of these are fairly large companies, so unfortunately, I can't disclose at this point.
Well, I look forward to when you can. Now, I want to move across to Silicon Valley because you're obviously based in that region in the Bay
Right.
Area. Now, what's the advantages of being there, given that there's so much movement happening right now in that region, particularly with regard to highly credible enterprises, even startups in the more traditional sense, really starting to consider blockchain as a viable option to decentralize their own business frameworks?
Yes, so we are actually launching a campaign to have discussions with various accelerators and incubators in the Silicon Valley, to the extent that there are companies interested in developing um, a new application on top of a public blockchain. They have many choices. We want to be the token of choice for the public chain of choice for them.
Hmm.
So um, we'll be looking to form MOUs with various accelerators and incubators. I think another benefit of being in Silicon Valley is just that China is a big bubble. The way the Chinese market views the use of crypto and the value of crypto is very different from what's out here.
Right.
So out
Richard,
here,
let's talk about that. I want to go deep into that comment. You brought it up, not me. So I'm going to try and really expand upon that. Now, what is the
okay,
difference fundamentally? Let's really dig deep. You talk about the
okay.
bubble, you relate it specifically to China. What do you mean in the way that China's approaching this? Because obviously people are noticing it.
Oh, I think one big difference is just that the Chinese market tends not to care so much about technology, but more about the hype. So
Mm,
there's in every market you would see um, a mix of weighting placed on hype versus technology, right? And maybe there's other dimensions as well. But I
sure.
would say those are the core features people focus on. But in China, the hype is extremely important. There are
Can,
many
can we can
people.
we talk about that in the
Yeah.
context of dumping? You know, if hype is the paramount, criterion for value, then obviously dumping is an outcome of that often.
Okay.
How do you sort of ensure against that kind of thing for VEET? Given that you are a Silicon Valley startup, and obviously surely you're aware of some of these practices going on that really are about the short-term game.
Well, so I don't remember if I mentioned this in our original video, but
Mm,
we do not give preferential treatment to our to some to one. How should I put it? So there's no bonus or discounts for one private investor versus another. All private investors got the same deal. Some of these private investors are huge, like Bitmain, and some of them are very small.
Sure.
like funds, in some other smaller countries.
Yeah.
Everyone got the same deal. So I think some of the dumping you might be observing could be from the fact that the private investors had a built-in profit of 50% or 100%,
For
and they're
these other
subsequently
startups you're
dumping.
talking about. For these other startups, not, you're not talking about VITE, you're talking about other startups that have come.
Of course, yes, yes, right.
I
So
see.
other types of structures where um, the crowd sale investors subsequently get a raw deal
Mm,
because they basically have this built-in disadvantage, right? So
right.
VITE, for better or worse, did not have a public sale for various reasons, but in our private sale process, we treated everyone fairly. So there's not that built-in benefit
So
for
you're
this one.
removing the nepotism and the favoritism from the equation. And I want to ask you what your vision is of the future of even ICOs, of essentially startups, in terms of metric design. Do you think that that will all change to really do models more like your own, where it's more egalitarian, it's more based on trying to provide for a fair system for the long term, so people actually want to hold your value, want to use your value as a utility?
Right. So I don't know if other people will gravitate towards this particular model, but I do think there needs to be more transparency
Hmm.
because there are so many new projects now, and for a project to differentiate itself from others, it really needs to um, be able to come up with um, some way of ensuring that they're playing the game fairly. And there might be rise of, say, third-party entities out there that would provide more unbiased, um, rating and
And
say
regulation, obviously.
due diligence on behalf of all investors.
I see.
There could be
Well,
regulations coming out on this as well, but
mhm,
regulations always lag a little bit. So I would assume there's more private side kind of participation.
I see. Well, it's good that you are being so transparent in your own position. I do appreciate that. Now, if we could talk about
Sure.
some of your roadmap, the things we haven't talked about that are specifically planned, and how are your milestones going in terms of, are you hitting them on time?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, the wallet app and the blockchain browser, um, they were actually there's a sneak peek came out,
Mhm.
and the full application will be released very soon, so the public can actually play with them on their PC or their Macs. We obviously open sourced our code base, so everyone's welcome to take a look there. The amount of code input has increased dramatically, and we are at a fairly steady and high output phase. We increased our team from um, 10 or 11 engineers to about 17 now. We've grown our operating team as well in Silicon Valley as well as in China. So we are definitely accelerating if you look at our real output versus our roadmap.
I see. Now, some say in the market, I've actually heard this quite a few times recently, given the concerns many have, that majority of platforms and even DApps are going to be wiped out as the quality emerges with a tech-driven sort of focus. Do you confidently regard yourself in that top echelon of tech-driven value, tech focus, and are you confident that you're going to be one of the ones that survive this turbulent time?
Yeah, so I think the key is it really depends on what the projects are looking to do. For us, our main goal is to create something where dapps will find it, where the dapp developers find our public blockchain a high performance platform and a place where it's easy to develop and deploy apps, where they think that the underlying infrastructure is secure for them to undertake their business. So with that main goal in mind, we're going to persist in that effort. We have many engineers and operating staff that my CEO, me, and our tech co-founder are personally responsible for. So we're going to, you know, with the bear market, I think maybe there's pros and cons associated with this whole phenomenon. Um, with a lot of distractions from speculations gone, perhaps it's now a good time to hunker down and keep developing.
I see. Now, I want to ask you something that's a bit controversial, but essentially, Richard, I wanted to ask you, are you the Ethereum killer? You know, essentially you are trying to develop from it. You have a Solidity plus plus. So is it your, you know, position that you literally could kill Ethereum, given that Ethereum right now really is struggling in value?
Um, that's a great question. To be honest with you, I actually think that more than one public blockchain can survive and thrive. I don't necessarily see this as a
But can you tell
one
us,
person
sorry to
show.
interrupt, but can you tell us how
Sure,
possibly? Because I mean,
sure,
respectfully, if you're faster, and literally faster, if you're VITE,
right,
and we have Ethereum as the first iterations of something you're building, how on earth
right.
would people, why would on earth would they consider something slower when they can use you
Yeah.
for business?
So I think it really depends on the time frame you're talking about, right? So I think there's two different factors to consider. One is the inertia. So if somebody has already written some code on some system, and there's tons of other third-party libraries associated with that system, what is their incentive of switching? I think on our side, we basically provided porting guide, and we are also incentivizing the developers with a higher performance system. So I think the probability of people moving over once our system has been live is actually quite high. Uh, that being said, I still feel that the Ethereum ecosystem um, can, I think the way I think about it is I think the pie will get bigger.
Hmm.
It's not like it's not like one part of the pie will grow so strongly that other parts of the pie will have to shrink in absolute numbers. But
Right.
perhaps perhaps the ecosystem has been propelled so much forward that the pie actually becomes bigger, and there's more dApps being built on these systems,
I see.
and it's not a
Sounds like
one winner take all situation.
it sounds like a very safe answer there, Richard. It sounds like, you know, you're aware and you're supportive of Ethereum, but you're also very cognizant that you're faster and that you've got perhaps more innovative and new technologies that really build upon the.
Yeah, and
Fun.
to be honest with you, Brad, I mean, nothing would please me more to have VITE basically take all of Ethereum's business,
Okay.
and that is what we're going for. It's just not my style
I appreciate that. I
to
really
be
do.
humble.
I appreciate that. I mean, obviously, we want all these initial platforms to do well, but we need to be realistic about what technology is really affording. And you're building upon something that really did revolutionize the space. So I don't mean to
Right.
just be disrespectful of Ethereum in what it's done. Now, Richard, obviously, there's a lot we could talk about, but I want to talk about the community because that does relate to some of the key successes Ethereum has had, and likewise with
Right.
BTC in terms of they've built some of the best communities in crypto. So how are you going to build upon that to really ensure that you have a long-term support network?
Yeah. So there's two types of communities. There's there's the fan base and there's the developer base. In
Hmm.
terms of fan base, since we last talked, we actually launched and maintained our community for in English, Chinese, Thai, Vietnamese, Korean, and Russian. So we are doing well over there. We have come out with lots of community rewards programs. People have complimented on the creativity of our programs. We recently had a video contest. So people from 14 different countries came out. Some went to the landmarks of their countries to say great things about Beat, to say how much or why they love Beat. So in terms of developers, we actually recently started a bug bash program where developers are rewarded for finding bugs in our systems. We've seen a increase in the amount of viewing activities of our GitHub code base.
Hmm.
Um, and as I was saying earlier, we're working with a few business integration companies, such as the German company I mentioned, in order to find, we're being very picky about the process, but the ultimate goal is to find clients that will be the right partners to integrate their systems into our framework.
Absolutely. And
So yes.
I noticed also you mentioned partners. You have a very strong list of partners already outlined in on your website. And that surely must give you confidence in terms of all the backing that you've had.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And we are in regular contact with our investment partners. And they have given us lots of resources from both a business development perspective and from a community building perspective and so on. So we're very lucky to have them on board with us.
Absolutely. Well, Richard, it's been a privilege speaking with you once again for a VITE update. For those who aren't familiar with this, essentially we're talking about a higher speed of approach. We're talking about a new generation, high performance, decentralized application platform. Literally, it's going to be a new iterations of what we've already seen in the past. It's exciting to see that you are moving into the real world context. You've talked about real companies. That's what we want to see and hear from the new generation startups right now, is proving to us as a community that you're not just talking but doing. You've done that today. Thank you very much for your time, Richard, and we really look forward to speaking with you soon for another update with VITE.
Thank you very much, Brad. Look forward.
You're very welcome.